I wrote a book about my parents called So Many Miracles, but I interviewed my parents from 1976 or so to 86. After I'd written the book and realized that it could be published, and I got a publisher for it, my parents got a letter from Sofia Banya, who is now in her 80s, I guess, who is the farmer's wife that had, hidden them during the war for 2.5 years. Her husband was dead. Her son was now probably around 50. It was now 1986, and it had been 40 years since they had been in Poland and had gotten out and made their way to the American zone to escape the Russians and try to get away from all that. That's a whole other adventure. But they managed to get away, and then they were at the camp, and my mother got pregnant, and we left Canada. Okay. So now they were getting a letter from her saying, I want to see you before I die. My mother said, well, I'm not bringing her here because they'll think we're billionaires or something. We lived in a $16,000 bungalow, in the suburbs of Ottawa. My father made less than $10,000 a year. But for Polish farmers, my mother was worried, true or not, whether or not it was going to happen, that they weren't giving them enough money. They sent them money. My father arrived to Canada with $10. He sent them $5. They always got money. In fact, they were the best off farmers in that area because the money my parents, who were lower middle class income, sent them for the last 40 years. Clothes, parcels, gifts, money if they could, but whatever they could, because parents had a clothing store. So they would send clothes for all the children, the grandchildren, for the wives, for everybody, They used the money to buy a new house, build a new house in that village of Wroclaw, right outside of Pinchev. I'm not bringing them here, she said. And I don't want to go there. Everybody's dead. I'm not going back there. All the memories will come flooding back. I don't know what to do. I happened to be working at the time with a great cinematographer called Vic Sarin, who's originally from Kashmir. And I had worked with him a few times. He's now a director. But at that time, he was a cinematographer for Canadian television. He did documentaries. He did all kinds of things, drama, all kinds of really cool things. He became a friend. I told him this, what I'm telling you now. And he said, why don't we do a documentary? Why don't we go back to Poland? There's a series on Canada. He said, the series Man Alive. Man Alive was a half-hour series on spiritual values, hosted by a really extraordinary guy called Roy Bonesteel. And it was part of the CBC documentary series, all about all kinds of cultural spiritual matters. By that time, by 1986, I was a very well-known Canadian actor on television and on stage, and in films too. And I remember going with Vic to CBC to see the producer, I forgot, who was running Man Alive, a woman, I've forgotten her name, sorry. And it was this pitch. Saul and I want to go back with his parents to Poland to have a reunion with the people that saved his life. Sold. That's how long it took. And I said, how much will it cost? And they said 20 grand to bring a producer, cinematographer, your parents, for a week or so, and a sound man, a guy who's one sound guy, and somebody who will help with the camera and sound. So I said, I'll put up half of it, and I want the rights after CBC to do what I want, because you may make half an hour, and I want to make maybe an hour, which is more what that is. So that's what happened. When I went to my parents and said, CBC has agreed to do this as a documentary film, that made the difference. They had a perimeter. They now had a community. They knew Vic Sarin, and now they felt that it would be contained, and also they had a reason to go. Aside from just seeing Sophia, there was going to be something they could tell other people. And in fact, the documentary film became a very important part of their lives, something they could show their friends. It was very important for me, and I didn't know I was going to have kids yet. So at that point, it was just a very important thing to put on at the Toronto Film Festival. It was a big hit at the Toronto Film Festival. There were many screenings of it. They got a lot of press about it. They got a lot of press about it because they're really, you'll see, they're really, lovable and easy to like and very funny as a couple together and very touching. And it's a very, maybe it's kind of an old-fashioned documentary in many ways, but I'm proud of it because Kathy and Vic did a great job, and my parents were really open-hearted, and there were accidents that happened that we didn't expect to happen, of course, in a documentary film. An old friend of my mother's, photographs that happened, amazing things that happened, a Polish guy saying, "You want photographs of the period?" I said, "Yeah, well, you're lucky because it's summer." So why are we lucky? Because the guy who has the photographs is drunk 6 months a year. He's drunk from July, basically from somewhere around October for 6 months, and then he's sober for 6 months. Right now he's sober, and he has his own photographic collection, including all the shots of there's shots of the actual roundup of the Jews that he took from hiding. I mean, a Polish guy, not a Jewish guy, that he took of all of the town in flames, of the square in flames, of the Jews being rounded up on their way being marched towards the gas chamber, towards the camps that would kill them. He had all these shots that I was able to get and use for my book. Photographs of my mother in school when she was little, that because by accident somebody approached us and said, "I used to go to school with her. I thought she was dead. I'm a Polish Catholic, but I'm your mother's." I was in school with her from first grade to sixth grade or eighth grade, and I have all the photographs. And so we put them together without my mother knowing who it was. And my mother meets this woman on the street, and this woman starts to cry. My mother has no idea who it is. And she's trying to be nice to this woman who seems to be crying because she thought that my mother was a ghost walking down the street. And they were like best friends. And then my mother recognized her. And then they go in and they look at these pictures, says that our teacher, who they loved, the Polish Catholic teacher, is alive. And so they went to her, we filmed them at her apartment. And it was really cool. And of course the reunion, which is really emotional and really interesting in many ways. It was, as you can imagine, it was I heard stories that I'd never heard before, which are really moving. And some very funny stuff that I'd never heard before, because memories come back with location and smell and things that they recalled when they were young teenagers together and lovers for the first time. I saw them as young lovers for the first time. My parents, who were actually younger than I am now, when we brought them over, because it's 31 years ago. And it's interesting for the stories that we don't tell as well. There were harsh things that, because the Banya family, Banya being the last name of them, he was a real son of a bitch. My father had to stay alive every single day by, he really wanted to sell them out and get a couple of bags of salt or flour in return for their lives. And it was his wife who convinced them not to. And also my father raised the boy because it wasn't his son. He was a bastard son because she was raped by the former landowner where she worked, gave birth to this child on a field. He took her in and never treated the son as his own. My father was 22 years old, and there was an 8-year-old boy there. My father's the one who taught him his catechism, taught him how to write his name, became really his first father and his first son. So when they met, when my father was 66 and this boy was 50 or 49, I watched my father meeting his first child, in a way, But his attitude in the documentary is that his father, he calls him his father, was a hero. That's how he saw his father, because, they saved their lives and all of that. But my recollection of it was as good as he was gone, because it was a real battle. My father trying to train him how to be a decent human being for 6 years, and educating him how to be a decent human being for the 2.5 years that they were there, and after the war as well, and sending them money. And the truth is that I never felt a particular animosity towards him. Being anti-Semitic and a Polish farmer was like living in Los Angeles and being a Dodgers fan. It was mother's milk. There was nothing more natural. The church taught it to you from the time you were a baby, that they were Christ killers, and you were taught it every Easter, and you were taught it every Christmas, and you were just, even though they're worshiping a Jew, they're taught it that's your enemy, and so being raised with, especially if you're uneducated, and a farmer, it wasn't a big deal. Besides, my father says, if it was switched around and you told me that if I hid poles, that they were after them, and if they found the poles in my house, first they would burn my house down, then they would kill my children and my wife in front of me, and then they would kill me, and that's what the Nazis would do. Are you asking me would I hide the poles? I don't know. I can't ever blame him. He didn't ever turn us in. He wanted to, but how do I blame him for that? That's how he grew up, that's who he was, but he didn't. And he used to beat his wife on this issue, violently. None of which you could tell. Well, she says it in the documentary, actually. She says, he beat me over this issue. It's not a black and white story, and it isn't for anyone, whether it's Rwanda or Yugoslavia or South Africa or wherever the hell it's going on somewhere on Earth every second of every day in human history. It's the same story.